Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
He's in the building!
Drink the moment. Drink it.
I said empty your mind.
Coquettish and coy. Ow. Ow.
What?
And there's people that are dying.
The wickedly talented.
More than great. It was historic.
Crack is
Work.
Oh, good for you.
I have to apologize.
One of the hottest. Welcome back to The Reheat, a podcast that re-examines the hottest celebrity news and scandals of yesteryear and asks how would we react to the same events if they transpired today. I'm your co-host, Sadaf Hassan.
And I'm your other co-host, Sarah Sahagian. And this week, we're discussing Elisabeth Moss in all her complexity. She's the former child actress who grew up to become one of the most iconic TV performers of all time. From her early days portraying President Bartlett's favorite daughter, Zoe, on The West Wing, to playing the legendary Peggy Olson from Mad Men and bringing June to life on The Handmaid's Tale. She's done it all. She's also the person who had a disastrous and short-lived marriage to Fred Armisen in her 20s. And if all that weren't enough for you to chew on, Ms. Moss is also a Scientologist who has achieved the coveted status of clear, so she is a woman of some influence in the church. So, Sadaf, how did you first encounter Lizzie, as her friends call her? What does she mean to you personally?
Okay, so I'm a late adapter to The West Wing, so it wasn't that for me. For me, it was Mad Men. Mad Men is my favorite show of all time. I love it so. It means a lot to me. And the character of Peggy, her character, also means a lot to me and has been so essential to me just in terms of the way I approach pretty much anything, but especially work and especially working in media, which, as we know, is very white and is very male-centric and is very older male-centric. And as a lot of my friends know, I've had a picture of Peggy literally on the back of my iPhone case for years, probably a decade now. She means everything to me. And so therefore I felt a adjacent love, if you might say, for Elisabeth Moss. But, you know, I think I have to think that through because she's got quite a checkered personal history.
Yeah, I mean, Mad Men is also my favorite show of all time. And I loved Peggy. I would say, though, she actually wasn't the most iconic feminist character for me. My favorite feminist character on that show was actually Trudy Campbell, who I thought really came into her own and discovered feminism in a way, in a trajectory that we don't always expect. We always think that, okay, discovering feminism means getting a job and being really great at it, which Peggy and Owen do. They both become executives. But Trudy was more about, like, becoming a feminist in her marriage and having boundaries and not accepting crap from men and living her truth that way, even though she was a housewife. So I always found her the most compelling. And I actually think Alison Brie is a really underrated performer. And I think that's part of why that performance packed such a punch, even though she was a relatively minor character. But definitely Peggy meant a lot. Like everybody else, I've shared that meme of her smoking the cigarette and carrying her HR box, right? We all have. I think every millennial woman. Yeah, I know. And it's beautiful. I think every millennial woman who's ever had a job has felt like Peggy at some point.
My God. I remember the day that I had to carry my box out of one particular job where I felt a lot like I was living a little bit of Peggy's life. And I felt very much like her when I walked out of that day. And with my box, no cigarette. I couldn't do the cigarette. I couldn't go that far.
It wasn't the 60s.
Not the 60s.
So I'm excited to talk about this because Mad Men is our favorite show for both of us, I think, by far and away. Oh, yeah. And it's one of those things where without her, it doesn't really work. She is a hinge character. She's so important. And so, yeah, I mean, that's why she has loomed large, I feel like, in our pop culture lives. So let's start at the beginning of Ms. Moss's life. Elisabeth Moss is a millennial who was born in 1982. Her parents, Ron and Linda Moss, were both musicians, with her dad being a trombonist and her mother playing blues harmonica. She told The New Yorker in 2022, quote, "Growing up in a family of musicians, you weren't a dilettante about things." She also added, "If you had a chosen art form, you took it seriously." So as a child, Elisabeth studied ballet, and she was quite good at it. She was pretty elite at it. An LA kid, Lizzie also started acting professionally at the age of 7, appearing in such fare as 1990's Lucky Chances and Suburban Commando. The 90s, like, what were titles doing in the 90s? Like Suburban Commando?
I probably watched it, honestly.
In addition to her work as a child actor, Lizzie was also a child Scientologist who was raised in the church. And it's the church that some refer to as a cult. Some people don't refer to it as a religion. Some people refer to it as a cult. And then obviously the people inside Scientology are offended by that. So that's a whole debate. Sadaf, this is the perfect opportunity for me to ask you, why do you think so many celebrities grew up in Scientology? They didn't just join it later. A lot of them grew up in it, whether they're raised in the church or joined sort of, I mean, I guess a little bit later. It produces a lot of celebrities. But I mean, both Leah Remini and Elisabeth Moss, it's kind of ironic, were raised as Scientologists.
Yeah, and as we know, Leah Remini is a really famous what's the word for it, defector. So that's really interesting, and she said a lot about Elisabeth too, so I find that very interesting. But I also think that it's a cult. I think it's a massive ass cult. I think it's very creepy. But why do I think so many celebrities have resorted to it? That's the word I'm going to use. I think that because I've written about it so many times over the year, you'd think that I would have a more refined perspective on this. I don't really, but here's my general thought, that Scientology does, I feel, center a little bit around a kind of narcissism and a very big sacredness that is attached to the self in a way that no other religion, I think, is, but many cults are. And because of that, it does attract a lot of people who maybe didn't grow up with any other religion or things that we know as religions fundamentally, and they maybe turn to this. Maybe a lot of the time they're artists, they're people who didn't have a lot of money, they're more like the hippie type, and Church of Scientology came calling. As we know, they still do the thing where they hand out the brochures outside train stations. Like, they do that all the time everywhere. They do it a lot in the States. When I lived in Boston, it was constant. And so I think it's a really easy way to attract people who are looking for something more. And I think in that way, it's very exploitative. And so, like Lizzie's family, her parents were artists, and it doesn't surprise me that they would resort to this and find some kind of community and then raise their child in it thinking it's a great idea. What do you think, Sarah?
Yeah, I definitely think that you're right. It is more self-centered than other religions. It allows you to do that. Although what's interesting is once you really get inside it, they can strip you of all of your rights and all of your humanity. So I think the window dressing allows for a lot of self-help and focusing on what makes you happy. They're also really big on boundaries with, toxic people, or what they call suppressive people, which I think that if you in your life are looking for boundaries, I mean, and I think they go too far with the suppressive person thing. They think that anybody who questions Scientology at all is a suppressive person. But I feel like if that's something you're craving in life, you might go to Scientology. But I do know, having watched lots of documentaries about Scientology, once you're in, you can easily lose your autonomy to this cult. Like, they can really, I mean, they separate mothers and children sometimes. They can be pretty extreme. They can browbeat you into getting divorced. Like, it can be pretty horrible. And then you kind of lose yourself. But I mean, most cults lure you in with one promise and then deliver something completely different. So that also makes sense to me, that contradiction. And I also think that for the celebrities, the very elite celebrities, I mean, like the Tom Cruises and the Elisabeth Moss, and I know she's not on the same level as Tom Cruise, but she is potentially their most famous female member. I actually think she might be the most famous female Scientologist.
Wow, yeah, she might be.
She might be. They do take care of the really elite people, right? Like, after having watched Going Clear, I said to a friend, the friend I saw it with, the only person this religion works for is Tom Cruise. I understand why he speaks glowingly about it, because, yeah, it works for him. Everyone's ordered to be happy when he's there. They throw him birthday parties. They got him custody of his kids. It's a rational choice for him to be a Scientologist and for no one else. That was what I said.
Yeah,
but it might be rational for her too.
Yeah, they treat Tom Cruise so goddamn well. In fact, it's very true that they even hired him what you might call modern day slaves, but people who would very much serve as his help, quote unquote, and would even like clean his floors with toothbrushes. That is a thing that happened. Auditioning girlfriends for him that they approved of. These are all very real things. And as we know, his ex, Nicole Kidman, is famously considered a suppressive person.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I would say that at this point, Elisabeth Moss might be the queen of Scientology. Obviously, Tom Cruise is the king, but maybe she might be their queen. I don't know. We don't know a lot about how they interact with her. Tom Cruise is a more public Scientologist, but we'll talk a little bit about how a lot of people who know about Scientology think that even though she isn't as vocal, it's very clear that she's loyal. So, and we'll discuss that. We'll debate that. Okay, so for most of her youth and childhood, Moss was a working actor. While it didn't make her rich when The West Wing debuted in 1999, playing For most of her youth and childhood, Moss was a working actor. While it didn't make her rich, when The West Wing debuted in 1999, playing President Bartlett's most developed daughter, Zoe, put her on the radar of fans of early prestige TV. And I think that's significant.
Yeah.
Then came Mad Men. Created by Sopranos alum Matthew Weiner, this series debuted on AMC with John Hamm in the lead as Adman Don Draper. Moss was actually listed second on the opening credits behind Hamm, and Elisabeth Moss was still fairly unknown at the time. She actually didn't even know that she would be listed second in the credits until she saw the show for the first time. She didn't realize her character was considered that significant. So that was a big deal for her professionally and kind of announced her as an important performer in her early 20s. So that was pretty great. Yeah. She also beat out January Jones, Christina Hendricks, and Maggie Siff for the role of Peggy. They all auditioned for that because that was the female lead. And it's funny because January Jones and Christina Hendricks, more so Christina Hendricks, both became iconic for their roles on Mad Men. And I mean, I just can't see Christina Hendricks as Peggy. Like, Joan is also a complex, important feminist character, but like Christina Hendricks has too much presence and confidence to be Peggy.
Christina Hendricks is an underrated icon, and she should be in more things. She should be leading her own something. Good Girls was not even remotely up to her level. But yeah, I think of all those actresses, they all carry a kind of inner heft and strength that Elisabeth Moss, especially, she didn't have, but that's largely because she was younger. She has more of an innocent, childlike face. She has a different energy, and that worked so well for the character of Peggy.
Yeah, absolutely. She has, I would say, more. She can play a strong character, but I would say overall she has more vulnerability, and the whole trajectory of Peggy was seeing her grow into a strong, assertive woman, and she does. There's a lot of character growth, whereas I feel like, I don't know, Christina Hendricks was a little bit older, a little bit more experienced. I think she already seemed like a complete and developed person, and then January Jones, I think, just doesn't have the range.
Yeah, I mean, we could debate about January because I do think over the trajectory of the show, I think she got better and better, and I think I love her in that role. I really do. She certainly is not the best actor in that ensemble by any means, and I don't think she could have played Peggy, but she's got her own little skill. I always gotta defend her a little. I don't know why. I also just feel like that character was so railroaded by the end, and it pisses me off deeply. But anyway,
she was good in that character. I think she's not talentless. I think she doesn't have as much range as some of the other performers on that show who have spectacular range. Yeah. I mean, I've never seen her be truly terrible in anything. So I have to say she's not a bad actor. Like, even in Spinning Out, which is a bad show, she shows up and she does the work.
She does the work. She wasn't great in X-Men, I gotta say, but also that's X-Men. So, you know, what can you say?
And her personal life was tumultuous. Like, I don't want to get sued, so I'm not going to say what you and I both know to be true. But I'm going to say I'm giving her a mulligan for that. Allegedly. I'm going to give her a mulligan for that one. I don't mind that wasn't her best performance.
Yeah, guys, Google it
Yeah.
if you don't know what we're talking about, because we simply can't say it. We simply can't say it, but it's out there.
It's out there. It's allegedly things happened,
Allegedly.
and you can Google what allegedly
Yes.
happened.
Yes, there you go.
Yes, what we all know allegedly happened. Okay. While Peggy wasn't as glamorous as Christina Hendricks, as office manager turned pioneering executive Joan, this character became a feminist icon. The young secretary who grew up and later proved she was perhaps the best copywriter at the ad firm where she worked was an avatar for young women everywhere who felt unappreciated at their jobs and took comfort in Peggy's journey. I mean, who can forget, as we said, that legendary image of her smoking the cigarette while carrying her office supplies? Literally 50% of the women I know have used that on a weekly basis on social media, or at least they did in the 2010s, right? Vibes. Sadaf, I know you, like me, we've talked about it. We're just Mad Men super fans, right? So we've already talked a little bit about what the show meant to us, but specifically, what did Peggy's evolution over the course of 7 seasons mean to you? The fact that she went from secretary to just perhaps the most innovative creative advertising mind of her generation.
Well, it's funny because it wasn't that long ago, but it was still a time when we didn't really have female characters like that. I don't think that's an exaggeration to say, because she was also someone who went through a lot. We saw her, spoiler alert, but really you should be caught up by now, but very early on, she falls pregnant from having sex while an unmarried woman. That was really wild to see. And then to see how she handles it, and how she handles it in association with Don, who is her boss, but also the lines are really blurred there and what their dynamic is throughout the years. And seeing her grow, being able to find her voice and being able to talk back to Dawn and be able to defend herself and know what she deserves, to the end being basically someone who rivaled him in some ways. I don't know, there was something about it that gave me so much conviction and motivation, and just my own career and how I've approached it. I'm also one of those people who very much takes a lot of motivation and inspiration from fictional characters. Rory Gilmore is a big reason I'm a journalist today. That's not a secret. So I don't know. I thought it was one of the most unique character trajectories when, in simplest terms, it doesn't sound that way. But if you watch the show, it's really gorgeous. And also, it's just such a beautifully written show. And that character is so beautifully written. And I don't think anybody else could have played it apart from Elisabeth Moss, which is a big thing to say.
Yeah, and I also have to say, in addition to her evolution as a career woman, the evolution of her confidence, her attitude, her ability to talk back to her boss and stand up for herself, I also really loved her relationship with Stan. Yes! I think a lot of people by the end felt like that was one of, I honestly think that was one of the best enemies to friends to lovers trajectories I've seen on TV.
God, yeah.
And it felt so real when they at the end realized they love each other. And I know it could have, unless on a worse show, it could have just felt like, oh, we're wrapping it up, like on Downton Abbey. It would have been like, all right, put a bow on it, make sure these characters end up together. But they made it feel real. They made the evolution of their relationship feel real.
We're not the only, we're not, okay, let me rephrase. A lot of people disagree with us and do feel like it was abrupt, but I agree with you because I thought it was really beautiful. It did feel so real to me, especially when you have a relationship in the office when maybe you shouldn't. I was like, this is how it goes. Where like suddenly one day you kind of realize, oh, this is what we've been doing all along, and it just fits and it works. And it always made sense that for Peggy, she wouldn't have the kind of romantic trajectory that Dawn had in many ways, obviously. But for her, it wasn't the kind of thing that would be like glittery and sparkly. It would make sense that it was this guy who can call her out and go toe to toe with her, and also is a really great creative mind. Like, can you imagine the great firm that they would run together? I wish we would even get one spin-off episode of that.
And Stan was an interesting character because for some reason he was the one that the guys all underestimated. And I think it's because he did something that was seen as traditionally feminine, which was he was an artist, right? And so I remember the episode where he came up with the idea of making the LA office a big deal for the firm, right? And he said to Dawn, I want you to move me there and I'm going to be the head of it. And Dawn said, I didn't really see it that way. And he said, no, you didn't see me that way. Yes! And then Dawn thinks about it and then takes the idea for himself, right? And so I think that because Peggy is... Yeah, I know. I think because Peggy is a woman and Stan does something that they all sort of see as more feminine, they're kind of the people who are constantly underestimated, probably underpaid compared to the other people at their level, definitely receive less respect. So I felt like they actually really could relate to each other and understand each other. And there wasn't really a power difference. So unlike all the other relationships in the show, like we can have a debate about whether you should date someone in the workplace. It was consensual. It didn't feel icky. It just felt like two equals who could relate to each other and found each other.
I think that's fine anyway, but I know that's controversial, but absolutely agreed. He also didn't describe toxic masculinity at the level that all the others did, which we know was horrific.
Yeah. I mean, he has some moments, but overall, when you explain to him a feminist perspective, he gets it. Like, I remember the scene where she explained that she had a son that she gave up for adoption. And she said, this is my right to move on just like a man. And then he got it right away. Like, he at first didn't understand, but she explained it. And then he was supportive of her. So I felt like he was the most able to evolve.
100%.
Yeah. I thought it was romantic. It was romantic. You know what? They probably ended up getting married, having 2 kids they never saw because they were always at work, right? Like, started their own firm.
Yeah, they weren't perfect, but they were sexy. I love them. I love them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Like, they would have produced 2 trust fund babies. They would be like the rags to riches parents who have the trust fund babies and like, back in my day, we had to work so hard. Why are you like this? And they're like, Mom, I deserve a Lamborghini because you literally never saw me growing up. That is why I'm asking for it. I'm sure those are the conversations.
Sequel spinoff if one day Elisabeth Moss runs out of jobs, which will probably never happen. The woman is very booked and busy, but I'll take it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I'm convinced that they never saw their kids, and then their kids became like spoiled boarding school kids who are like, Mommy, I'm going to be an equestrian. Like,
really? I don't know if they go that far, because that's very Don Draper children. I don't know if they're quite that. I envision them a little bit more as the hipster type, but I don't know. You're right. Maybe they turn a little more corporate, but
it's however the nanny chose to raise them. Like, I think, right? Like, I don't think they really would see them. That's just my take. And I know that sounds cynical, but I'm like, those people never left the office.
But don't forget, they had one of the appeals of Peggy too was that they had a very diverse group of friends. They were friends with queer folks. They were friends with more racially diverse people. So I think those 2 were an example of the future. She was always a symbol of what the future could be. And the irony is that we're not still quite at that level. Like I said, she still feels like a really revolutionary character now, but it is this beautiful vision. And I think Elisabeth Moss started to parallel that vision in Hollywood, which is really fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. So critics loved Elisabeth Moss's performance as Peggy. So did fans. In fact, Vulture did a 2014 profile of her where the headline was "The Very Bright Future of Elisabeth Moss," because she was 31 at that time. Mad Men was still in the air. And it was just seen as she's arrived. She is one of the greatest actresses of the millennial generation. It's inarguable. We can't see her not working for the rest of her life. And I think there are very few actors where it's just that clear that early on that they will be a presence forever in our lives. They're that talented. She also garnered 6 Emmy nominations for her role as Peggy, but she never actually won for the prestige series. Mad Men itself won lots of Emmys for Best Drama Series, but she never won. And John Hamm only won once for the final season. He barely won. And you could tell when they were announcing the winners at his last Emmy award show for Mad Men that he was convinced he would be snubbed again. Like, he's like, I'm the Susan Lucci of this category. Like, I'm not going to win. You could tell he was genuinely surprised. So if anything, I think Mad Men, while it did win a lot of awards, was perhaps under-awarded, especially for the performances.
It actually is one of the things that breaks my heart so deeply to this day. Like, she absolutely deserved a trophy, but John Hamm not having one for especially the earlier seasons, I think is one of the biggest crimes in Hollywood. That man is an unreal actor as well. The 2 of them are really just an unbelievable dynamic that I don't know that we've ever seen quite at that level on television. Like maybe we've got the siblings in Succession. They're definitely like a unparalleled dynamic. But those two, as a man and a woman who are not family, like I don't know if we'll ever see something like that again.
And not attracted to each other.
Yeah, they worked so well together. They're friends off screen too, which just adds to my constant theory that you got to have chemistry on screen and off screen to really make it work like that. But that show did deserve more love. I think it really got more of it towards the end. But God, Mad Men is underrated in my opinion. I will always say that.
Yeah, I mean, my favorite TV scene of all time, and definitely my favorite scene with John Hamm and Elisabeth Moss, is when they decide to start a new ad agency and he's trying to recruit Peggy. And Peggy doesn't have to go, right? She doesn't have to go, but he's trying to get her on board for this risky new venture. And she basically says, well, what will you do if I choose not to come with you? And she compares herself to a scared poodle and is like, is this what you think of me? I'll follow you anywhere. And he just looks at her and says, if you don't come with me, I will spend the rest of my career trying to hire you.
You're going to make me cry. That scene makes
chills.
me cry.
Chills. And some people at the time said, oh, he's being an admin there. He's trying to sell her on this. And a little bit. But I do think it is genuine, where it's like, you're my work soulmate, right? Like, you're my creative soulmate. My creativity doesn't fully work without you. You bring out the best in me professionally, and I need you. And it's kind of funny, because if you said that, like, if you don't love me, I'll spend the rest of my life trying to convince you to love me. That is creepy. But, like, I will spend the rest of my life trying to hire you. Somehow comes off as not creepy. Like, I'll keep offering you more money. I'll keep sending you offers. I really felt like that was a good encapsulation of their creative relationship and how they were work soulmates.
It was platonically romantic. It was gorgeous. It was gorgeous. And listen, Don's whole thing is like, when do you know he's schmoozing and when do you know he means it? And I think he meant it. He meant it. And I've had those relationships with editors before, and it really is a unique, special dynamic. God bless it. If you haven't been encouraged at this point to go watch it, if you haven't, or rewatch, please do.
And I think that there's a reason why we keep returning to this, because, well, this is my theory. I think America is at its best, American pop culture, when they do shows about work, because in America, people work so much that the primary relationship in your life is with your coworkers. And that's why I think their family sitcoms come off as twee and cheesy and not that interesting.
That's very good. You should write a story on that, Sarah.
I should. I think Succession works as a family story because it's also a work story, and it's a metaphor for work as family, right?
Very good theory. That's excellent.
So I just think American writers don't know how to write family drama very well, and that's why it's melodramatic.
Yeah, listen up, American writers. HBO, hello.
Well, exactly. Spend more time with your families if you want to write family dramas that are any good. And that's why, like, European shows about marriage and families are always much better. Like, if you watch them, it's like, oh, because they only work 40 hours a week.
You're so right. I love that thought. Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on. All right. So Elisabeth Moss, her future is super bright. She's announced herself. I would say at this point, she's kind of becoming, like, in my opinion, the Meryl Streep of TV, right? Yeah. Of TV, right? Where it's, and TV is a very different medium. And I actually have to say, as much as I love Meryl, she's not as good on TV as some other people are, right? Like, she's better on film than she is on TV. Like, somebody like a Christine Baranski can kill it on TV week to week, probably wouldn't be as good in film, but it's definitely better at TV than, like, Meryl is. If you've seen Meryl on TV.
The reason is that Meryl over the last, and I know people are going to hate me for this, but over the last decade or so, Meryl has been turning in a lot of schmaltzy performances because she doesn't need to do it anymore, right? It's such a shame because she could be doing way better. But yeah, even on Big Little Lies, what the hell was that? But anyway, that's a sidetrack. We've done so many
sidetrack. But Elisabeth Moss gets TV. She can do movies too. I'm not trying to say she can't do movies, but no millennial actress understands TV, I would say, better than Elisabeth Moss. Like, she grew up doing it, and that's probably why, right? Like, she's done it, and she's done in particular prestige TV, since basically the first prestige TV show, which I would argue was The West Wing. That was the kind of the dawn of the era of prestige TV when Aaron Sorkin gave us The West Wing. And so I think she gets it better than anyone else, that particular genre and how to do it from week to week.
Yeah.
So let's go to her personal life, because while her professional life was just immaculate, she was riding high, during the Mad Men years, her personal life was very messy. When her co-star John Hamm guest hosted Mad Men in 2008, Moss met then cast member Fred Armisen. The couple were engaged within months. Armisen is 18 years Moss's senior, and their marriage was very short-lived. In fact, it ended in 2011, so it was just a couple of years. Moss later described the marriage as, quote, traumatic in an interview with The New Yorker. She explained, "I'm glad that I'm not there. I'm glad that it didn't happen when I was 50. I'm glad I didn't have kids, and I got that out of the way. Hopefully, that's probably not going to happen again." Moss also added, "Looking back, I feel like I was really young. And at the time, I didn't think I was that young," which I think a lot of people can relate to, getting married in your mid-20s and thinking that's a normal age to get married. And I don't know, times change.
How old was she at that time?
So in 2008, when she got, in 2009, when she got married, she was around 27.
Okay.
So she's not, I think a lot of people get married in their mid-20s or get engaged in their she got engaged at 26, married around 27. I think a lot of people for whom that happens feel like, oh, this is normal marrying age. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. And maybe they are still a bit young. Maybe they are still finding themselves, especially a bit young to marry someone who's 18 years older than you.
Yeah. Oh, God, yeah.
Right? That power differential is interesting that comes from one person being older. So I feel like you're probably quite young to make that decision.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I know that there, don't at me with the example of my best friend married someone who's 18 years older and they've been married for 15 years and they're so happy. I know that can happen. I know that works out. I just understand why she said, I didn't realize I was young, because society doesn't paint you as young at 27, but actually you are.
Millennials operate on a different timeline, I think. So, yeah.
She was probably, and I don't know her, but very emotionally immature because she had just been working her whole life. I don't know how much time she had to develop herself as a person, right? She was just, from the time she was a child, she was constantly working or doing Scientology stuff.
Yeah.
So at the time of their divorce, tabloids and many fans speculated Moss's Scientology is what got in the way. Indeed, Elisabeth Moss is still a very serious Scientologist. I mean, she's achieved the status of clear, which is their most elite status. That's the weird way they describe, being at the, you're self-actualized, you're enlightened according to Scientology. However, it might not just be Moss or even Scientology that's to blame. I like blaming Scientology for things, but I think here it's being scapegoated, as is Elisabeth. Elisabeth Moss told Page 6 of her divorce, "One of the greatest things I heard someone say about him," meaning Fred Armisen, "is he's so great at doing impersonations, but the greatest impersonation he does is that of a normal person. To me, that sums it up." And you know what? That could come off as just the catty bitterness of somebody who's divorced. But Fred Armisen himself even admitted on Howard Stern that, quote, "I was a terrible husband." He added, "I feel bad for everyone I've gone out with." He basically has said to people that, when he's in a relationship that he doesn't like, he falls in love really quickly. He wants to commit really quickly, kind of sells you this romantic story. And then once it's real, once the forever has begun, he kind of loses interest and plays a lot of video games and ignores his partner until they kind of get fed up.
I hate him. I hate him so deeply. And that quote about the best impersonation he's ever done is that of a normal person. It's so funny because, you wouldn't think this. It's Elisabeth Moss. It isn't actually Meryl Streep. And yet 15 years later, I remember that quote word for word because it was the first time she got very personal. And I also thought it was one of the most striking things a celebrity has ever said of their relationship. And it's so gorgeously coded. She didn't really give much away. At the same time, it feels like such an offensive thing thing to say. And I must say, I always thought the combo of these two was bizarre. Fred Armisen is a comedian. He's been on SNL for ages. He's on the house band on Jimmy Fallon, I believe, right? And so he's always been a bit of a kooky character. I think the characters he plays on TV and in movies, folks have sometimes think it's not dissimilar to who he is. I find him so odd. They were such a bizarre combo. And then the fact that he kind of admitted it, I mean, he really just sounds like an overaged fuckboy and a dork at the same time. And I'm like, Elisabeth, you were in your prime, woman. Like, that's who you chose? That? Mind you, Natasha Lyonne, another goddess of our times, has also dated this man. And I can't comprehend that either. They also are no longer together. What the heck?
I don't know. It's like how I don't understand why everyone keeps dating Jared Leto. And Jared Leto is at least like traditionally handsome. I don't get it. Like, he is traditionally handsome. I still don't understand why people keep dating him. But this is more extreme. This person has told you he's a jerk. He's not traditionally handsome. He always goes after younger women, right? Yeah. Which to me reads as creepy, right? It's not just like, oh, I happen to like this woman who's 18 years younger. It seems like it's a pattern. I don't understand it, but I was never a huge fan of him. Like, I didn't find Portlandia as funny as everyone else did. I mean, I chuckled sometimes, but I didn't think it was brilliant and innovative. So maybe if you think he's a comic genius, he's more attractive to you. I don't know what Elisabeth Moss's sense of humor is. Perhaps it's that. I have to assume it's that people find him funny. I have to assume that that's what it is.
I think so, but listen, and we've touched on this a little bit in the past. So there is a phenomenon that happens between Hollywood actresses and comedians, often SNL comedians. It's such a common pattern. Most egregious example being Scarlett Johansson and Colin Yost. But I think one of the things that we always tend to overlook is because the Hollywood actress is so often A-list and beautiful and like really good at what she does, we tend to assume like, what the hell is she doing with that guy? But I think what we tend to forget is, well, they probably mirror each other in some ways. They probably share their shitty politics or shitty views or whatever the reason is that we don't love that guy a lot. Colin Yost has some shitty politics, and there are rumors that he is not a great guy, and I feel like that probably adds up for Scarlett, allegedly. These are my opinions, maybe not, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. Same thing goes for Mindy Kaling and BJ Novak. Like, there's so many couples like this, or former couples, and I'm sick of this pattern because I don't get it. I think the worst kind of man to date personally is a funny guy, where that's his whole shtick and nothing more. I need my man to be funny, but I don't want that to be his whole thing, because if it's his whole thing, he will be playing video games all night. I'm not here for it. No, thank you.
I do have to say their marriage is pioneering, because this was part of the early wave of like actresses marrying SNL guys, right? So I think she kind of started that trend for millennial celebrities, where who's your go-to husband? If you're like, because I mean, Scarlett Johansson did it. I mean, Emma Stone did it, right? Ariana Grande almost did it. So I think she started that trend for millennial actresses and performers of like,
forget Pete Davidson. Like, there's so many. There's quite a few culprits. Yeah, exactly.
You go to SNL to find your guy. I feel like at this point, women must be guest starring on SNL looking to meet someone. I feel like that's what these millennial actresses are doing.
Well, I mean, hey, even January Jones, she dated Jason Sudeikis. Bill Hader is the one exception for me personally, because I love that man, and I do think he is just a marvel, and he's been able to date a lot of great women. I think there were rumors that he also dated January Jones. I don't know that that's true, but I say he's my one exception. But generally speaking, I find this math horrific and foul.
Yeah. Okay. So I think she started the trend. Maybe she inspired other women. Who knows what happened? Well, Moss's marriage may have failed, but her career certainly didn't. Moss went on to star in such feminist prestige TV as Jane Campion's Top of the Lake. She also starred in Shining Girls, the film The Invisible Man, which is a great horror movie, a really good feminist horror movie. And she also started playing her second most iconic role, for which she actually won an Emmy for Best Actress, portraying June in The Handmaid's Tale. So that adaptation of the classic Margaret Atwood book that kind of felt like it was predicting the future. And I know that it's not perfect. I know that there are problems with it. There are a lot of books by men that are classics that have more problems. So I always think it's interesting that we harp on Margaret Atwood for not having created something that was perfect.
Yeah.
Because I mean, like, read Philip Roth. Like, if we're gonna say that Margaret Atwood, if we're gonna criticize her, I feel like he's much more problematic. And there's a lot that she got right. Like, regardless of whether how we feel about that text, Margaret Atwood is definitely a genius for forecasting the future when no one else was talking about these things. She understood the environment and how that intersected with politics and made these predictions that are eerily similar to the way our world is going now. Obviously, it's heightened because that's what a dystopia is. They have to give you a heightened reality that is the worst case scenario to scare you. But it's not that far away from what actually happened, right? As Jimmy Kimmel said to Elisabeth Moss, did you stop making the show because we decided to live it in America, right?
Ooh,
like
that's good. That's well
right. Said. Exactly. Because Roe v. Wade was overturned. Now, people with transgender people are having their rights completely stripped of them. They might be creating a registry for people with autism.
Yeah.
I mean, all of these things are happening, which are very similar to the plot of The Handmaid's Tale. So Moss also served as executive producer of the series, The Handmaid's Tale, which won Best Drama at the 2017 Emmys. So it was all round for the first couple of seasons critically acclaimed. I think where they ran into trouble was where they ran out of source material.
Yes. I haven't been listen, I watch every damn thing she does, and when I find out she's got something new going on, I go nuts. Like, I don't think there's something she's done that I haven't seen apart from this, and that is largely because I find the show very difficult and triggering. And it doesn't help that it's set or shot in Toronto. Like, I know so many of my great feminist friends love this show and have been so good at keeping up. So maybe one day, like in the distant, very liberal and free future, I'll go back and watch it. But I haven't been able to. But from what you're saying, that's what I've heard is the general take.
It's hard to watch.
Yeah.
It's very hard to watch. One thing I like about the show is it's a true ensemble show. Elisabeth Moss, unlike a lot of people who are really talented and executive produce their own projects, hasn't created a vanity project. She allows the whole cast to have time to shine. I mean, Serena Joy is evil, but a really fleshed out character, especially by the last season. Samira Wiley is also given time to shine.
Yeah.
Like, she lets people be their most talented selves, which I appreciate about her. I think that shows she is a generous performer and a generous executive producer, because, like, she doesn't have to. It could have just been a vanity project.
You know, I'm going to make a comparison you're not going to like, Sarah, and it's to a fellow Scientologist, but this is also something that Tom Cruise is really great at. He also is really good at stepping back and bringing on other women co-stars and really letting them have the spotlight, and he's kind of one of the few male movie stars, I would say, who's really good at that. And she is such a great example. She's also a really great producer, and she's been taking on so many projects. She's been bringing them to the screen constantly. This woman, again, does not sleep, and a lot of the work that she brings to the screen, she brings those same people she's worked with in the past on Crew 2, which I think is so great. And like, she often films in Toronto. She'll work with the same people. She'll bring on the same co-stars, and a lot of that work, and I know we're going to touch on it in a bit, but it's very female forward, and I do love that.
Yeah, absolutely. So when she won the Best Actress Emmy in 2017, which was obviously something she wanted, and I don't fault her for that. I mean, after getting snubbed for so many years for Mad Men, like, get it. You deserve it. It is funny that she had to suffer as a character more than, like, imaginable. Like, Peggy suffers in Mad Men. There's a lot of suffering. But, like, June is next level suffering, and that's what the Emmys want from women. They just want you to suffer. It's almost like agony porn for the men. And I think they kind of enjoy it as in, like, yeah, you're doing your paces, you're paying your dues. And that's something I don't like about the Emmys and how they choose the women who win Best Actress. Like, you know, very rarely can you win it without being completely debased. Like, I think about Sarah Snook winning her Emmy, and it's an amazing performance. But the season she's, you know, the last season and she wins the Emmy, that character is totally debased by the end. right? The
Yeah.
series basically ends with her debasing herself to her creepy husband, right?
Well,
Like holding his
yeah.
hand.
I mean, Oscars too, right? Like they like a sex
Mhm.
worker. If you've been
Mhm.
raped, then you're finally
Mhm.
in contention. Mind you, to
Exactly.
clarify, fictionally raped, of course, is what I mean, and it's really disgusting. But that is the world that we live in, alas.
Exactly. And no one in recent memory on TV has been raped more than June Osborne was. Like that's the whole, every episode is her being sexually assaulted, right? And it is relevant to the plot. It's not gratuitous. That is what, it's not like Game of Thrones where there's gratuitous rape. This isn't sexy. It's shot to be upsetting and disturbing. And that is something that happens, and it is worth exploring. Like I know a lot of people feel triggered by it and feel like it's inappropriate to show that much rape. I feel like when we're showing rape from the perspective of the victim and really showing it as disgusting, not sexy, I think it is something that is actually worth portraying on screen. And also, like, should we say to rape survivors, like, you can't portray rape on screen? Like, I don't know. Like, just say that is something that doesn't sit right with me. As long as it doesn't look beautiful and is not glamorized, I'm okay with it. But it is interesting that, like, literally no character in recent memory, other than maybe Meredith Grey, suffered as much as June Osborne has. And that's how she won.
That's hilarious.
So in Moss's acceptance speech, she thanked her mother for teaching her to be kind and a fucking badass. Some have said that saying the F-bomb in the speech was a Scientologist move because the F-bomb, like saying, fuck, is almost a sacrament in Scientology. I feel like this is grasping at straws. I don't know. What do you think about that?
What in the world? I think it's I think the way that she spoke in her, because I actually remember, because I was also so thrilled, but that's the way she often speaks, like in interviews and in print and whatever. Like she's always gets a little bit of a fuck in there. It was just very her. I don't think it was anything Scientology coded.
No, lots of feminists speak this way. Like one of my new obsessions is Monica Lewinsky's new podcast, which I love.
Yes.
She's such a good conversationalist. And Monica Lewinsky, who's not a Scientologist, she is Jewish. She is one of my feminist icons. She's constantly swearing, right? Like,
yes,
so
exactly.
Lots of feminists swear. Like,
yes.
I don't think that means she was trying to signal to the Scientologists, like, hey, I'm a Scientologist first. That, I think, is just like people looking for reasons to dislike her. I feel like it's more about her than Scientology there.
Well, yeah, but I think it's one of those things where it's always been so confusing with her more than anybody as a Scientologist, because she doesn't talk about it. And she's often says, like, I won't address this in an interview, don't ask me. Yeah. Like, I interviewed her once, and that was something where it was like, we're not going to talk about Scientology. And I was like, well, I'm not going to ask, because I had her for 10 minutes, and I basically spent most of it. Like, I don't get starstruck, but when I interviewed this woman, I was like, I love you so much. You mean so much to me, and I'm praying against everything. And I was not about to waste it on Scientology. She was lovely, by the way. But yeah, I think that's one of the reasons. We just have so many questions. So then you are desperate to try and find hints where you can.
Perhaps Moss's biggest Scientology-related scandal has to do with Leah Remini. So Leah Remini very loudly left the church as an adult after having been raised in it. So she too, like Elisabeth Moss, was raised in it and then became a successful actress. Obviously, Leah Remini did not become successful at the level of Elisabeth Moss, but she did become something of a household name. I mean, there are many seasons of The King of Queens, right? Many, many seasons of that show. Lots more people watched it than watched Mad Men, sadly, right? Like,
they did. By the way, Leah's a great actress, so I'd love to see her in a sitcom again, a good sitcom.
No, absolutely. She's a really good sitcom actress. It is hard to do a sitcom. It is hard to show up week after week and do the same thing, but make it seem fresh. So absolutely. I'm not trying to denigrate the work she does. But I mean, she didn't have the critical acclaim. However, it is possible more people recognized her on the street. Like, I feel like on a regular basis, she probably had more fans come up to her. And so Leah Remini says of this, So Leah Remini has said essentially that Elisabeth Moss believes that she can't talk to me. This is what she told The Hollywood Reporter in 2017. There's this thing in Scientology called acceptable truth. It means you only say what's acceptable to the public. But she believes that I'm an antisocial personality because I've spoken out against Scientology. So she isn't allowed to talk to me. And me knowing that, I wouldn't put her in the awkward position. So she's basically making it seem like I can't talk to her because I'm seen as a problematic person. And kind of at the end, almost seems like, I think what the last line kind of implies is like she's a captive, or like not like can't fully leave. Like maybe she's scared to appear with me, scared to piss off the powers that be in Scientology, which is what I've always wanted to be the case. I've always wanted her to be a victim of Scientology and not an active participant. I think a lot of fans project that onto her. And I don't know if Leah Remini has some insider knowledge. I'm not sure. But in 2018, Elisabeth Moss addressed these comments. Sorry, not in 20. Take that out. So in 2018, Elisabeth Moss caused a bit of an uproar when she walked out of Leah Remini's acceptance speech at the Television Critics Awards. So there might be some there, but she later addressed this and said, I went to the bathroom. I wish it was more interesting than that. I don't believe that, because an acceptance speech is 2 minutes. And if you really don't want it to look like you have your hate on for Leah Remini or you can't be around her, I think you'd wait the 2 minutes. Like, I don't know anyone who wouldn't just like hold their bladder a little bit, right, for that. I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know. I remember this too. And there was a part of me that also kind of fell for it. But again, I felt desperate for some hint. I don't know. I think it's a bit silly. I don't know either way. I could see it either way, but I just don't think so. I'm going to assume she really did just have to pee. I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt on this one. And frankly, no, yeah, I'm just going to give the benefit of the doubt on this one.
Yeah, this is the one I find suspicious. I actually think she did it on purpose, but yeah. I don't know if she did it because she believes in Scientology and therefore has an issue with Leah Remini, or she is worried that the church will get mad at her and do something to her if she doesn't ostracize Leah Remini. I'm not sure which it is.
God, that is how I felt before. Maybe now I'm becoming soft in my old age, but yeah, again, it's tough because we don't really know Elisabeth Moss. For someone who is on TV constantly and who I don't remember a time where
I can't hear you.
I don't know anything about this woman. Like, I just don't know.
I don't know. And that could be intentional. Sometimes it's intentional so you can play a character, and Elisabeth Moss has suggested that, you know, you don't want to know too much about your actors because you want them to disappear into their roles. At the same time, that is kind of a convenient excuse for not having to address Scientology, whether it's because you are a committed Scientologist and you don't want people to judge you for it, or you are scared of Scientology so you don't want to discuss them and piss them off. Yeah. Does feel like a convenient excuse. It doesn't feel genuine to me.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you.
Yeah, anyway, it's the Scientology stuff. It makes me sad. Me so too. I have another question for you. Scientology is not great for women. If you've watched many documentaries on the religion, you know they've even separated mothers from their children. They certainly helped Tom Cruise ensure his children were estranged from his ex-wife, Nicole Kidman. Meanwhile, in her professional life, Elisabeth Moss, who is a Scientologist and a practicing one, makes almost exclusively feminist art about sexism. Can Moss have it both ways? Can you be a Scientologist and a feminist icon? Or are these two identities mutually exclusive? What do we think?
Oh, God. I think it doesn't make sense, and it actually really troubles me. It really upsets me, and I know that I'm sounding like a hypocrite because, as I've said, I'm such a fan of her work. And I watch everything she's in, like, religiously, pun not intended. But it's tricky because I struggle with this more and more when I think about her Scientology past and present. And I think it's certainly smart that she doesn't talk about it, because if she spoke about it more, I think it would be harder for me to separate the two. I think it almost makes me feel like, not that it's exploitative, but she's taking advantage of a time, a period, a form of feminism, a type of character that she continuously plays that she maybe doesn't even believe in, which I find really confusing because she plays these characters with such conviction, very smartly, again, in a way that I don't think many people could. I don't understand how she's able to do that when she is a dedicated Scientologist. I'm just so confuzzled. Like, I just can't wrap my head around it.
Yeah, so here's an interesting question. Documentaries like Going Clear and Leah Remini's work on Scientology, sort of blowing the whistle on it, came out after Elisabeth Moss established herself on Mad Men. Yeah. Do we think that a Scientologist today, knowing what we know now, gets to play these iconic feminist characters if she's starting from the bottom of the rung, the Hollywood ladder?
No, and again, it's different for men and women, right? I want to make that point clear too, because you mentioned Tom Cruise. We've talked about him a lot in the past. He's obviously at the top of the rung, but I think for male actors it's so different. But for female actors, obviously the scrutiny is greater. I think that if she was somebody who did talk about it more, and it was something that everybody knew about, it was more common. No, I don't think she could have gotten away with that. I also think, though, Mad Men coming out now would also be just something different anyway, as opposed to when it did before, even though that wasn't that long ago. But yeah, I don't think so, which is funny, isn't it? Because I don't know, who can we compare it to? I mean, who is one of her peers who is a Scientologist? Who comes to mind? I guess
Laura Prepon is a bit older, but not much.
But Laura Prepon too is not someone who's been that front facing, I think, for Scientology quite to the level that she has. Because I think if she did, she also wouldn't have been able to be in Orange is the New Black. Like, that's also a character that how could she get away with that either? But Elisabeth Moss is definitely the most egregious example. I also do not feel it is completely a marketing strategy, because she seems to go into this so wholeheartedly. It's every fucking project she does is so feminist. I don't think that you can do that when that's not an ideology that you even believe in.
I know.
Sarah, I'm lost. I'm very lost.
I know. And it's not like cynical girl boss feminism.
No.
It's like, The Handmaid's Tale, like a literary feminist classic, or The Invisible Man, which is very artistic and highbrow, right? So I do think that it seems genuine. Like, if it is performative, this is a real commitment to the performance of feminism, right? Like a real commitment. This is what makes me think that maybe she's a secret victim, a secret hostage of Scientology.
Yeah, well, I think it certainly seems that way. I mean, I don't know. I also don't want to make it seem like we are giving her such a pass to that degree.
Yes,
there is
absolutely.
no other option, right? But you and I both, that's just what we want so badly. I think maybe, again, this is another example where I've fallen so deeply in love with her characters, I can't envision her being that much of an asshole, but maybe that is the truth. As I said, she did date Fred Armisen.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can leave Scientology, and we know that once you get to a certain level, it's harder if you're even Leah Remini level. And Leah Remini was successful, but it's harder for her. Someone like Nicole Kidman, yes, they destroyed her family, but they didn't destroy her career, right? She was able to keep that. They couldn't just completely destroy her reputation. So I feel like Elisabeth Moss is now at that level. She's an executive producer. She's, one of the most acclaimed actresses of her generation, that she could leave if she wanted, right? I think they couldn't destroy her career. However, her family's in Scientology. Lots of her friends and loved ones, she grew up in it. It's really hard to leave a cult because you have to leave your entire life. It's just like, okay, obviously being raised in a religion you don't believe in is different from being raised in a cult you don't believe in. I'm not comparing the two. But a lot of people kind of pretend to believe in a religion they don't believe in as adults so that they don't have to alienate their friends and family. Yeah. So is it maybe that's what's happening here? But is this conscionable given how much damage Scientology is doing, like holding people hostage, separating mothers from their children? Although I guess mainstream religions do that as well. So maybe it's the exact same thing.
Do you mind if I read a quote from her that I think is
Sure.
I want your thoughts on this quote. So this is from 2019, and this was a new season of The Handmaid's Tale was about to come out. She was speaking to the Daily Beast. It's a bit meaty, so Quote, there's two things you're never supposed to talk about at a dinner, politics or religion. And of course, I'm doing The Handmaid's Tale, which is politics and religion. So it's a strange situation where you're going to be asked about these topics. So then she kind of very vaguely starts to touch on the Scientology. She says, quote, I choose to express myself in my work and my art. I don't choose to express myself about in interviews. For me, it's so hard to unpack in a soundbite or an interview, but I will say that the things I truly believe in are the things that I've mentioned, and I think that they're very important. That means nothing, but anyway, she goes on to say, I think people should be allowed to talk about what they want to talk about and believe what they want to believe, and you can't take that away. And when you start to take that away, when you start to say you can't think that, you can't believe that, you can't say that, then you get into trouble, then you get into Gilead. Oh, so whatever happens, I'm never going to take away your right to talk about something or believe something, and you can't take away mine. Ah,
she's a good debater.
She is. It's very lawyery.
Yeah, I mean, she's clearly very bright. Like, and no one has ever accused her of not being intelligent, but she's very good at arguing with people, which makes me think she doesn't really believe in the church, because I think if she wanted to be a staunch advocate of it, she could probably do a better job than Tom Cruise of making it seem legit.
I actually, well, you know what's funny? My mind went in the other direction. I feel like from that quote, I feel like she is an advocate. No, I think she's a fan of it, but I think she's a bigger fan of her career and her personal life. And she's smart enough, as you say, to know that she has to draw a separation, because that's a very clever thing to be aware of, because the moment Scientology starts to invade on your career, like Leah Remini is Scientology now, more than King of Queens, which is wild. Also, she's not the best comparison to Elisabeth, but she's smart. I think she is deep in it, and I think she knows the more she talks about it, it'll be a mess for her. But that also means that the longer this goes on and the more she does this kinds of projects she does, I'm having trouble. But I don't know that Elisabeth Moss is sitting there worrying about fans like you and me, you know?
No. And like, you know, the way she creates her shows, it almost makes it impossible as a feminist not to want to watch, where it's like Rory Gilmore plays a queer Harvard professor and a handmaid. Like, I'm in. I want to make sure Rory Gilmore survives. How am I supposed to not watch that? Like,
God, you and me both, Sarah. You and me both.
Yeah. Well, as of late, Moss's life is still a little weird. Like, let's call it what it's always been. Like, why use a different word? She shocked fans in January of 2024 because she showed up visibly pregnant for an interview with Jimmy Kimmel. She still hasn't confirmed who the father is. And to be fair, she doesn't owe us that information, but it's just part of the pattern of her just doing really unexpected things, right? Like marrying Fred Armisen, showing up pregnant. Like, usually you would just sort of tell everyone you were pregnant if you're about to do a round of press, right? So that the story doesn't just become like secret pregnancy, right? You would just announce it. And I don't even think she wanted the extra publicity of exposing a secret pregnancy. Like, I don't think that was a stunt. No. I think she's just weird and doesn't know how to handle the media in the best way.
I think she's a bit weird, and I think, unfortunately, well, I mean, listen, again, the woman's always working. She's going to have a press moment at some point, and she is big for press. She's got to do it. It's not like she can avoid it. She's Elisabeth Moss. But yeah, I agree with you. If she could have hidden that belly, she would have.
Elisabeth Moss even brought her baby to the set of the final season of The Handmaid's Tale. She told The Hollywood Reporter, any of us who had the privilege of being able to bring our kids or see our kids at work, we would every single time be like, aren't we lucky to do that? And you know what? Good for her. She acknowledges her privilege. She acknowledges that that's a privilege. I actually think that the more feminist thing is not bringing your kids to work. Like, I don't like it when feminists are all like, when people are like, CEOs are like, I took my baby to the office. It's like, yeah. What most average people want who aren't privileged is childcare. So talk about the privilege of having childcare and not having to take your kid to work.
Well, yeah, totally, because also she definitely has like a nanny who's taking care of the kid in a trailer. Like, it's not the same thing, right?
Exactly. So it's not the privilege of being able to take your kid to work. It's the privilege of not having to. And when you have to go shoot a scene, your kid not being there, right? Like, most people want childcare and are advocating for that. Most people don't want to be distracted by their crying baby while they're trying to write an email to a colleague, right? I'm just going to say that as like a woman who's not a movie star or a CEO who has a child, that I actually get really upset when I see pictures of people like, I'm such a feminist girl boss, my baby's like here while I'm going public. Like, screw off.
100%. I am so deeply with you. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so now it's time for Hindsight is 2025, where Sadaf and I discuss what we might have done differently if we were the subjects of today's episode. So Sadaf, what's your answer this week? What would you do differently if you were Elisabeth Moss?
Sarah, I cannot simply answer this question. I don't know, because of course it comes back to Scientology, doesn't it? And it's tricky because I selfishly don't want her to talk about it more, because then I won't be able to watch her work. And then at the same time, I want her to talk about it more. Maybe even, okay, you know what? This is my answer. I want her to do one interview with a good interviewer, maybe like a Ronan Farrow type, not an Oprah type. I don't want her to be coddled. And I want her to directly talk about this succinctly, no vagaries. I want to hear her out, and then I want it to be done. Let's leave it at that, because I think it's a bit ridiculous. She's not answering to the irony of what she's doing here by playing the characters she does. And she is so smart. So I feel like if this is the life that she's chosen to live, she should be able to talk about it. I demand this, Elisabeth Moss. I demand this.
I do too. My one, and I was thinking a lot about this because I was trying to deconstruct my bias here and trying to ask myself, like, as much as I see Scientology as a cult, would we not see all religions as cults if they were developed in the 20th century?
Well, I do.
Right? I think we probably would. Yeah. Right? And so part of it, I do understand Scientologists who are like, this is presentism, this is discrimination. Because as much as they do horrific things, like, I can tell you about a lot of horrific things the Catholic Church has done, right? Like in recent memory and still today, right? Like if we're talking about, I was discussing how Scientology is bad for women. So it's hypocritical to be a Scientologist and to create feminist art. But while Catholic women can't be priests, they can't have leadership roles. The church doesn't approve of abortion and, has very weird rules about birth control and things like that. So I would never say if there was like a Catholic celebrity who's doing feminist work, like it doesn't count because she's a Catholic. Same thing with like, there are certain denominations of all sorts of religions where women don't have the same rights as men. And there are people who are still either very committed to those religions or like, culturally committed to those religions who make feminist art. So is this a double standard? Like, is this fair of us to critique Elisabeth Moss for being a Scientologist when pretty much all religions hate women?
Oh, yeah, I think it's fair for us to critique us because she is so front facing and she has chosen to be the face of feminism. And that's a huge thing for me to say. But she has, I think, with the work that she's chosen to do, and she knows that she is in the same way. Like if she were a movie star, she'd be pulling in a big box office draw. She knows she can get asses in seats for her TV shows. She knows what she's doing. And I feel like, as you said, she may be the queen of Scientology. Therefore, she should be talking about it. She does need to answer for it. I'm sorry, Elisabeth Moss. We don't have L. Ron Hubbard here, so I need to hear from you. But yeah, you're right. I mean, of course, this is a pattern in so many other religions, but Scientology, I don't think is a religion, no matter how much it insists it is. I think it's a cult, and I think it's too mainstream, and I'm just puzzled by all of it, and I do think she owes us an explanation. Sorry, I do.
I do think if you also want to be a feminist and have your religious identity, and this is my personal bias, I do think you have to be willing to critique the sexism in your religion. Correct. So as somebody who, I'm culturally speaking Anglican, I was confirmed, I still pray, and I don't talk about this a lot, but I complain to the Anglican Church all the time when I think it does things that are not fair, right? For example, when the Anglican Church in Canada wouldn't condemn Prince Andrew for his pedophilia and his sexual abuse of young girls, I wrote to the Bishop of Toronto to complain. I said, listen, and he, the bishop was openly gay. And I said, like, listen, you spoke out about LGBTQ rights, which I totally support and I think is great. We need to do the same. Like, this isn't a political issue. You need to stand up and say it is wrong to sexually abuse young girls. And technically the royal family is at the head of this religion. It's a weird religion. Like, that's the thing. Like, how is that different from Scientology? Because the royal family is at the head of the religion. And I do still interact with that religion. And it is also weird. It's weird.
It is weird. I grew up Muslim and I've recently been trying to figure out ways back to it a little bit. But I spent a lot of my later life feeling like more of an atheist because I struggle with the fact that there are quite a few sexist ideologies in the religion, and that's really hard for me. Although, just a disclaimer, a lot of the ones a lot of you are aware of are part of the fundamentalist side, so I'm putting a distinction there. That's not the case throughout the religion, it really isn't. But there were some specific things for me growing up that I really struggled with, and that pushed me away from it. And that's something that I am still constantly thinking about, critiquing, evaluating. It's something I talk about with my family, and that's something that they are also evaluating. And so I think this goes so beautifully to your point, Sarah, that yes, we have to be able to critically think through the principles that we follow, even if it's about spirituality, like, and especially because other people will take a page from us. Like, I know that I have people who are listening just on the podcast or who read my work. That makes me feel an obligation to think about what I'm saying and to think about it smartly. I don't have anywhere near the audience that this woman does. Just saying, she should be thinking that way. Yes, you're so right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Speak on it, Elizabeth. Speak on it.
Even the Secret Wives of Mormon Lives ladies do talk a bit about, you know, the issues in the church, right? And they are pretty candid, and they are not seen as serious intellectuals. And maybe that's unfair. Maybe that's unfair because they're actually doing a lot more advocacy for the members of their church than Moss is doing for the members of hers.
In fact, it's a great example. I wrote a piece on this, and maybe I'll link to it in the show notes. But that's a fantastic show, largely because of that, because they're so open to critiquing their own culture and religion in a way that I have never seen for people of that group in Utah, women like that who are kind of trying to live the trad life, but also feel like there's problems in it and they don't want that life, and who are also breadwinners and aren't supposed to be considered the breadwinners in that kind of way. It's actually a great show. A lot of you are probably underrating it. So and for that reason, it's really, really great, actually. So yeah, I'm so with you, Sarah. So hello, Elizabeth, again. Comment, speak up.
Yeah. Okay. So my answer for what I would do differently for hindsight is 2025. What would I do differently? I mean, I guess if I were Elisabeth Moss, I like yours, Sadaf. I don't think I can do better than that. She should probably sit down with people and just explain, like, okay, here are the things I like about Scientology. Here are the things I know people don't like. Here's my response to that. Maybe be brave enough to say, here's one thing I would change. I feel like she's built up enough goodwill for Scientology by being such a successful person who grew up in Scientology that they won't go after her if she gives a couple of pointers to the religion, right? Like, she's the most successful, in my opinion, product of Scientology because she grew up in it. The most successful person. I don't think we can think of a more successful person who was raised in Scientology, right? Especially they care about showbiz more than anything else. So she was raised in Scientology and became one of the best, most acclaimed actresses of her generation. Dream come true for Scientology, right? Yes. I feel like she has the social capital to probably get a couple things changed without completely turning them on her. But then maybe that's wishful thinking on my part. Maybe these people are psychopaths who would turn on her regardless.
I'm with you.
Okay, and on that note, it's time to end. We could literally talk about this forever.
We could, God. This might be one of our longest episodes.
We have so many feelings about Elisabeth Moss.
We do.
So you can listen to The Reheat for free on the Seeker app. You can also find the show on the Frequency Podcast Network or wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to hear more from me, you can find me at Sahagian Sarah on Instagram. I'm also on Blue Sky, but I know no one else is. Guys, please join Blue Sky. Sadaf, where can our listeners find you?
I'm not on Blue Sky, but I'll consider it. So I am on Twitter at _Sadaf Hassan. And if you liked this podcast, please rate, review, and subscribe so other listeners can find us too. And if you'd like us to keep growing, we'd love for you to support us on Patreon at patreon.com/The Reheat, where we've got some goods in store for you. Final message: go watch Mad Men. I'm going to start my rewatch tonight.
Me too.